He was elected the same time Steve was to the Montana Senate in 1990, and he served through 2001. He's a cattle rancher and irrigator from the Big Timber area. When he was in the legislature, he led on many water issues, and he chaired the Senate Natural Resources Committee. Since then, he's still involved with water. He served on the Water Development Advisory Council, the Board of Natural Resources and Conservation, back when we had one of those, and the Montana Reserve Water Rights Compact Commission. Please welcome Lorents Grosfield.
Yeah, I gave a pitch yesterday for the reinstating the Board of Natural Resources. It didn't go over too well with some people, but I'm still thinking it's a good idea. Well, I too, as Dorothy said, I got to have some words later with Zach Brown for getting me stuck with this little deal. I'm going to do a little different kind of presentation than these guys did. I'm going to talk about a couple of specific bills that I worked on. And, well, I'll save that for question and answer time. The two bills I want to talk about are a water leasing bill, water leasing for in-stream flow, and also a water salvage bill, which was kind of a small deal, except that it became a tool for water leasing. Actually, I had been going to the legislature for some years before I was elected to lobby on largely water issues, some other issues. I got hooked on water, I don't know, a long time ago. And the water leasing bill that I wrote, well, really the legislative council wrote it, but you know, we had some influence on how it was written. That was actually introduced in a session before I got there. And I had talked Representative Dennis Iverson, which probably a lot of you remember, into carrying it. He had a hard time getting it through, I'll tell you. It actually was killed several times, and he somehow rejuvenated it and eventually got it passed. The Montana Stock Growers Association and the Montana Farm Bureau Federation, two agricultural groups that I have been members of ever since I came back to the ranch in the early 70s. They didn't much care for the bill. In fact, they were very frustrated with me, and I think they considered disowning me. But, and it was in the context of the water reservation process that everybody's talked about here. And I had barely survived that process on the Yellowstone that gave what I viewed at the time way too much water for in-stream uses of fisheries and water quality. I still think that it was overly generous, but I'm relatively at peace with it. At the time, the average outflow of the Yellowstone River into North Dakota on an annual basis was about 9.9 million acres of water. And Fish and Game, at that time, Fish and Wildlife Parks now, had applied for 8.8 million acre feet for the fisheries. The DNRC at that time, they analyzed it and spent a lot of time analyzing it, and they recommended that the amount be reduced to 3.3 million acre feet, which is it's a huge difference. Well, the Board of Natural Resources spent, I think Dorothy said, 3 years working on it, and they finally, they were the authority that could grant the reservation. They finally granted 5.5 million acre feet. So 8.8, 3.3, 5.5. And shortly after that was done in December of 78, I think, I happened to run into Jim Posowitz, which also, he was also mentioned here before. And I'd known Jim for quite a while, and I said, Jim was like number 2 or 3, I think, within the Fish and Game department. And I said, Jim, so you guys applied for 8.8, DNRC said 3.3, and you got 5.5. How did you guys feel about that? And he looked at me with a big grin on his face, and he says, we were not disappointed. Which maybe is partly why I still think it was a little overgenerous. But I don't know if anybody, I don't think anybody at the time of that whole process realized it. But what the water reservation process on the Yellowstone River ended up being was the allocation of almost all of the Yellowstone River for all time. Sure, in high flow years and in spring runoff, there might be, or might have been, some water left over. But really, it was like a permanent planning effort for the whole Yellowstone River and most of its tributaries. It was effective in protecting plenty of water in the main stem. It didn't take care of any spawning tributaries because they were largely already fully appropriated, at least a lot of them were. And that's where the water leasing bill went a long way toward helping. The bill provided for, and I'm going to quote here, in-stream flow to protect, maintain, or enhance stream flows to benefit the fishery resource. Of course, since it involved a change of use, any lease had to go through, any lease had to go through the change process with all the protections for senior water rights, including that no lease could be approved until all the objections were resolved, and the flow amount to be protected could only be the amount that the water right had previously consumed, as opposed to what was diverted. And the distance that you could protect the in-stream flow, that had to all be protectable, had to be determined, and so on. Well, in the next session, which was my first, 91, I introduced the water salvage bill that I mentioned, and it basically said that if a water right or permit holder improved his irrigation system, for example, or in some other way changed his use so that he didn't need as much water, that saved water, that salvaged water, could be actually leased to someone else as long as it didn't increase, or he could use it himself too, as long as it didn't increase his place of use. But the use of this act complemented water leasing statute, and Fish, Wildlife, and Park used it several times to augment in-stream flow, beginning in the year after its passage. On Mill Creek, just south of Livingston in the Paradise Valley, it was a major prime spawning tributary of the Yellowstone River. And the Mill Creek Water and Sewer District, which involved a lot of water users, there were a whole bunch of them in this district, they upgraded their irrigation system from a whole bunch of ditches to pipes. And it was actually gravity flow irrigation, so they didn't even have to pay any electric bills. But they did a massive upgrade of their system. And there were 2 water leases that came on just a year or so after they did that. One of them had to do with just one individual who had a private system, but kind of got it from the the end of the water and sewer district. And he was able to offer up 6 CFS of saved water to a water lease to the Fish, Wildlife, and Parks. And at that time, they paid them $7,500 a year for that lease. Along with that lease, there was another one on Mill Creek that was quite interesting. This creek is an excellent spawning tributary, especially for cutthroat trout. And the only problem at the time was that by the time the spawning and hatching of the fry occurred in August, the creek was usually dry before it reached the mainstem, which means most of those fry perished every year. So, I mean, although it was a great spawning tributary, it didn't do anything to help the population of cutthroat in the Yellowstone. So what the Department of Fish, Wildlife, and Parks came up with, their fisheries biologists came up with, was a very unique proposal. They paid the water and sewer district $12,000, almost $13,000 a year for this innovative approach. And what it amounted to is that the district would totally shut off their entire irrigation system for 48 to 60 hours once a year at the time that the fisheries biologist said, this is the right time, there's all kinds of fry in the river, shut down the irrigation system, let's flush them down to the river. And it worked. And it's amazing that just 60 hours, I mean, shut the whole thing down, and in 60 hours, you got all these fish, new young fish in the river. It's fascinating. Well, these leases and several others that have been negotiated over the last 25 years, they were more complicated than what I've described, but they've been successful. And I think that by now the agricultural community is fairly comfortable with the process. I mean, they're very interested in knowing exactly how a lease is going to be enforced, the midstream flow is going to be enforced, and so there's a lot of, it's a tough job for Fish, Wildlife, and Parks to get agreement on all that. But it's not only the lessor of the right that needs to be pleased, but it's really all the other irrigation users on the stream that they need to be comfortable. Fish, Wildlife, and Parks has learned that they need to be comfortable before they're going to let it happen. But that's fine. That's a collaborative effort that has worked out. I think most of the use of the leasing mechanism has been in similar spawning type situations of trying to maybe get the fry down or trying to increase water in these spawning tributaries to make them better spawning tributaries. There are currently, I think, over 10 active leases statewide and several others in negotiation. I was going to talk a little bit about some water rights history, but I think we'll get into that in the question. One thing, though, that I can't let go by is a little sort of snide comment that the previous speaker talked about with respect to mixing zones. And actually, we had the noon table. Ours was way over there in the corner. And one of I was supposed to do that. One of the things that we talked about quite a bit at our table actually was mixing zones. And so I'm just going to be brief about this, but a lot of people think that there should not be such a thing as mixing zones. A lot of people used to say that solution to pollution is dilution. And people will say, no, you can't do that. That shouldn't happen. Well, I think the people at our table, and there was a wide variety of different backgrounds and whatever, they felt all right about mixing zones. And when I'm called on to describe what a mixing zone is, this is the way I do it. When you're going down the road this morning or yesterday, any time in the winter, and you pull up to a stoplight behind the car or two in front of you, you probably don't even think about it, but if you looked at that car in front of you and you see that smoke coming out of the exhaust pipe, that is, I don't know, carbon monoxide and a bunch of other poison. And which one of you in this room is going to get out of your car and go up there and put your nose right up to that and just breathe that for a while? You know? That is a classic mixing zone. In the air, you see it coming out, and then you don't see it anymore. It dilutes very fast. That's a mixing zone in the simplest way. And that's the way they work in water, too. But anyway, that'll do it.